Hello, welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Phyllis Anderson. Hey, Phyllis, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Craig.
Great to have you on the show. Fan of your work. I wanted to share a few pieces of yours with our audience. And so I went online and I selected a couple of pieces that I thought were quite interesting. And this was the first one I wanted you to talk about. Can you tell me a little bit about this particular painting?
Well, it's an image that I really enjoy, and I really liked this painting a lot. I've shown it a few times. All of my work is based on a real photograph, a real image, and that's a real mountain called Hans Peak, north of Steamboat Springs. Obviously, I'm very interested in the Colorado landscape, but what I'm going for is a kind of romantic, mysterious, fantastic kind of approach. So I call this a fantasy, and that's a very common thing for me in my paintings to take a picture and kind of use the right structures, the right proportions to make a landscape, but then to take it further into a realm of dreams or fantasy.
So are you the one taking these photographs or do you find them?
I take most of them. I did
Okay.
not take this picture. I
Oh,
have
okay.
friends who are photographers, and I often will actually, there's a common app that we use out here for hiking, and people can post photos of their hikes to the app. So
Hmm.
that's a source I've used at times.
Hmm.
This with the rolling hills and the road snaking through was really a lovely photograph that I found.
Hmm. I'm getting so many references to other sort of art history, just in the sort of mark making that you do. The outlines of the mountains are sort of Warhol-esque, the way that he would outline his figures.
Mhm.
But I also, in particularly, love the your color palette. Now, to me, your color palette really kind of I see a lot of Edward Munch in your palette, right?
Ah,
Sort of
thank
those the solid colors that he's so used to using, and not a lot of gradation. So I really kind of like that. But then you have this sort of fantasy element. Is this also a photograph that you took?
No, I did not take this one either.
Okay, all right.
But it's a real place. It's a beautiful lake out here in Colorado called Grand Lake. And it's funny you should mention Monk because, he just there was just a show at the Clark of Monk. And, that's obviously in Massachusetts, and I'm never going to get there, but I'm ordering the catalog for that book. And I have recently read a book about Monk, but many of the expressionists, Northern European expressionists, as opposed to the French expressionists who are fantastic as well. That whole era of painting is extremely interesting. And it's interesting that you should pick up on that. So I'm very aware of kind of, especially the American landscape artist. Marsten Hartley has always been huge for me.
Hmm.
Um, and Charles Birchfield. I mean, I can say that there are times when I've completely outlined something and said, "This is my Birchfield aura." So
Okay.
I'm aware of those kind of precedents,
Uh-huh.
and it's a fun thing to bring into your work. It's
Yeah.
another um, interest that the artist finds in making something.
Yeah, I don't expect that the general public would see those references, but I mean, I can see them, and it just adds another depth to the pictures that I really kind of enjoy. So the other reason for Monk is really it was his palette a little bit, but it was also some of his invented skies that he had. So he didn't do that a lot, but when he did it, he was spot on when he did it, I think. And
Yeah.
so, here you've got some inventiveness going on. So, is your sky here really just a repetition of the patterning that you're finding in the land, or
Yes, definitely. But I also like to call it an active sky. It's out here plein air painting is huge. And there are many really good artists that do that work. But I kind of feel like, while I'm getting into the shapes and that the land itself offers up, why does the sky have to be one big blank thing?
Hmm.
So to have this active sky was a way to bring rhythm and interest for me, the painter, into these compositions.
Well, I like the idea of the activated sky because you have such an activated landscape. So it makes the whole picture really moves your eye around. So this
Exactly.
particular one is a little earlier. Is this an earlier painting?
Um, they're all pretty much within the last few years.
Okay.
I think this is from, uh, I don't have I can tell you exactly, excuse me.
Well, I love this one. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of William Johnson, but his early works, the midnight suns that he would paint, it had that same sort of expressive quality, especially within the sky. And I chose this one in particular because I thought the sky was more activated than the ground on this one. With the layers of coloring. It was a very, even though it's very somber colors, I found it as a joyful picture.
Thank you. And this painting, by the way, came from a photo that my son-in-law took as a
Oh, okay.
backcountry skier. So it's a well-known peak that we're seeing in the middle there. But he and many backcountry skiers in Colorado, they get to these places in the landscape that the rest of us are never going to see.
Mm.
And that was part of the thinking here. Here's this landscape. It's a view of a peak that I've painted numerous times. But again, this kind of magical quality, like here you are in this incredible, beautiful place, and there's got to be some kind of a romantic reaction, a beauty that comes out of that. And I think that's what I was going for there.
When you're looking at imagery to use, does it have to have a personal connection to you, or are you just devoid of that? And you're just concerned with shapes and forms and the
Well,
building block.
it's a little of both. There are definitely times when something interests me because I see the formal qualities that could be developed or explored, I should say. But on the other hand, I do love the connection that I have to this landscape and have grown to really love. Um, I should say as a background that my daughter went to college at the University of Vermont, and when she graduated in 2007, she went right to Colorado and became a ski bum, basically. So we started to come out to visit her, and now it is so many years later, and she's long since married. There's a grandchild, and we moved out here, and it was sort of like coming home. As much as I love the East Coast, I love the Philadelphia area, I love New York, I love the beach. But there's something about the mountains here that I really connect with.
Oh, I can see that.
So a
This,
person,
go ahead.
well, I'm sorry, but there is definitely a personal thing to a lot of these pictures, and I'm looking at this one you've chosen, and I know exactly, even though this is an abstracted version,
Yeah.
I know exactly where this is, and I have hiked up to this spot. This is a spot overlooking the road that goes over the pass
Hmm.
um, near here, and it's very dramatic and very moving to me.
I chose this one. So I went on your site and you had a series of drawings on paper. So that's what this was on paper.
Yes.
And some of them get extremely abstract, but there's still the landscape, you know, that you're pinning it to. And I love that in this one. In this one in particular, just a little praise here. I love the variety of mark making that you were able to do in this. That scribble in the middle totally makes the picture because without that, it would just kind of fall apart. Um,
Well, I kind of think that that's what painters love.
yeah.
Painters love everything that paint can do. And with me, of course, I add chalk a lot. I add actual drawing tools to it.
Okay.
Uh,
So
It's
that's actually, it
what
was
art is.
one of the questions I had for you is you list a lot of these as acrylic with mixed media. What is
Right.
your mixed media? Is that just the
Excuse me.
pentimenti underneath, or is it other materials?
It's the drawing materials. That's what
Okay.
I. So that sometimes there's pencil, charcoal, definitely pastel. I have a beautiful set of soft pastels that an uncle gave me many, many years ago. And I just love their contrast to the chalkiness
Hmm.
with the flat areas of paint. So that's why I say that rather than list everything that might
Yeah.
be in the
Oh
picture.
yeah, yeah. So this is the final painting. So this was listed as a fire in the forest.
Yes. Um, I did a whole series, and every once in a while I do another one of fire imagery. And believe it or not, some of this comes from a site that's a government site called INCIWeb.
Hmm.
And there were fires out here that affected this local area. And
Hmm.
right around the same time, there were horrific fires in California. So
Hmm.
I don't know, I was just very attracted to this destructive side
Hmm.
of the beauty, a terrible beauty that's out there. Uh, and that's where several of these paintings came from.
I like this one because it was not just a landscape, but it was an event with a landscape, sort of that combination of the two. I would love to see this one giant. I think the idea of forest fires, painting forest fires, is a great idea. Uh,
Yeah, and there are others that have done this,
yeah,
but
I have to research some of that. So I wanted to just before I start the regular questions, I still have some technical questions. You had talked about mixed media. Do you seal your pictures at all? Do you varnish them or do a sealant?
yes, I do. I will use um, a spray fixative kind of agent on it. And of course, I tested them first, like, is what's this going to do to the paint? But I
Right.
definitely needed to fix a lot of the chalk. You
Okay.
rub against it and it
Yeah.
comes off.
It just goes
So
everywhere.
I do use that when they're heavy with chalk, because they're not always. The one you just showed, I don't think has any on it.
Funny enough, early this morning, I happened to read an article and it was talking about Monk's work, and they're worried because he never, on most of his pieces, he never fixed them. He never sealed them. There's no varnish on them. So they're very worried that they're fading and whatnot. So kind of
Yeah,
timely conversation about that.
early
Um,
paintings that I did were heavily varnished.
hmm,
They were mostly still lifes. And I had this kind of complex system where first I would build up a canvas with lots of just stuff in it. And
hmm,
then I would make an image, a still life, and then I would put layers and layers of varnish on it, which would make a glassy surface so that the image was actually hard to see. And
hmm.
I kind of carried that into some early landscapes. I soon stopped because you can't photograph it.
Yeah, but the general public, they love shiny art. They can't get
You do
enough of
love shiny art, and
it.
they adore oil paint. And I don't use oils
Yeah.
as much as I did when I was younger, and I love them very much. But as a kind of a mostly starving artist for most of my life, you have to clean up where you brush your teeth.
Yeah.
So you can't really use
No way.
oil.
That's the quote of the day. That's it. That's
Clean up
perfect.
where you brush your teeth.
So
Yeah.
I want to know a little bit about your start. Like, how did you get your start in the arts? Like, at what point did you say, you know what, I want to be an artist?
Well, I was always drawing, and my parents recognized that early on. And I came from a nice middle class family, and they got me some art classes. And when I went off to college, I actually went into like theater arts and thought I might do that. But it was the 70s. I dropped out, got married young. We had a motorcycle. We went to Texas, and we were on our own from a very young age. And we both said, let's do whatever we want. And
Hmm.
he went
Hmm.
into music and I went into art, and that was the rest was history. Now, at that time in Texas, when I went to art school, it was very much conceptual art.
Hmm.
that was being promoted. And I was obviously so much interested in painting. And I painted and I took what I could from the painters. And after art school, we went pretty much right to New York City. And once again, you're kind of lost in a giant city like that, even though I did have a lot of friends from Texas who went up to New York. So just trying to work your way through what you think you want to be doing. So I was pretty committed from a young age to wanting to make art and be an artist.
Hmm.
Uh, I will say that there were about almost 15 years where, we had kids and there was
Yeah.
just no way. There was no
Yeah.
time, no money, no space, but it was always there
Yeah.
uh, that I was going to be making art. And one quote I came across recently, which I really love, by Romare Bearden, he said, "Painting is an old man's game."
Hmm.
I think that's true. It just
Yeah,
takes
that is. Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
time, and it
Yeah.
takes years. And I'm finally kind of hitting my stride and
Yeah.
really loving what I'm doing.
I can see that in your work. I mean, I'm attracted to the handmade line anyway, but I can see your work getting stronger and stronger. Speaking of your works, I can't help but ask you a ton of technical questions. So one of the things I want to know is when you're going to make a new work, and so are you always now using photo references to start a work?
Yes.
Do you make any kind of sketch or preparatory beforehand, or is it just go?
No, sometimes I do. Sometimes I want to work out because, the photograph may not be as it is presented. I may say, oh, this is more, I'll change it. I'll
Hmm.
change the photograph's proportions in some ways. Um, and so sometimes it'll be a quick sketch to kind of map it out, but not always.
Is it mostly once you have the basic forms, is there a switch that then says, okay, experiment time? Just play and alter,
It kind of develops, and I
creeps
mean,
up on you.
times when I'm halfway through and I'll say, this this is awful. I
Okay.
always want it to be, uh, you're trying to make the best painting you can every time. It's like, why waste what you're doing?
Yeah.
Make it as good as it can be. And so that's where you're at when once it gets started. So, it gets started with, sometimes I'm right there with a palette, like, oh, let's see, I think I'll make the snow pink and
Mm-hmm.
start going with, crazy colors like this one behind me,
Yeah,
I'll make
it's
this,
great sky. Yeah.
yeah, this acid green sky and, keep the palette limited and blah, 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 and use purple. So sometimes I'll come up with those parameters.
Yeah.
I've got to say, I went through a brief period of doing more abstract art, and I was really much a person that used the grid and this idea that you have to have some kind of structure. I wasn't going to start making things that looked like, uh, you know, I don't know, some really crazy abstract expressionist. That was never going to be me. There has to be kind of tight formal constrictions, and that's the nice thing about a landscape.
Yeah.
It is what it is. That's
Yeah.
look.
For
So
me,
that
I'm drawn. I mean, I understand your forms, and then you play with those forms. But for me, there's a lot in there about color, and you had just mentioned purple, which makes me immediately think of the shadows of like Delacroix, where he dropped black. And I think that's one of the things that I like about your work is you could easily do black outlines to make the color pop, but that's not what you're doing. You're really getting the color against color.
and sometimes I will go with a heavier black charcoal line. If
Hmm.
I use black, that's usually where it's coming from a
Yeah.
charcoal line, which I can then soften and kind of use your hand and
Yeah.
smudge it.
How
So
much of how much of the works that are unsuccessful do they eventually all get reworked, or
yes.
yeah? Okay, there's no bonfire.
No, well, I will say that, I do paint over pieces.
Yeah.
I will paint over them. I say, well, this was then, this is
Uh-huh.
where I'm going now. I'm not sentimental about them.
Do you
No,
work on multiple pieces at the same time, or is it?
I have
Yeah.
right now I have a very small bedroom studio. So no, I don't. I'll some drawings up on the wall that I'll do. The nice thing about the drawings, as the ones that the few that I've put on my website, are that it's a way of being very loose,
Mm.
of just kind of getting right to the heart of an emotion or something. You can just get into the feeling that that landscape might give you. So I might have some drawings going. Um, but in general, I work on one thing. Although that said, I often have my eyes toward the next one, saying, "Oh, I can't
Yeah, right.
one. I really can't wait to start this one." So
Yeah.
sometimes I will leave things somewhat up in the air because I'm really interested in my next idea.
Yeah, I have the same sort of feeling, but for me personally, it's not only is it always about the next one, but I always hope it's a struggle because I find that if the picture comes too easy, I don't care about it. Like I need it to fight me a little bit. Speaking of fighting, how has your work? How do you think your work has changed over the years?
Well, obviously this deeper romantic expressionist vein has asserted itself more.
Okay,
And I think that's kind of where I am at and what I'm perfecting.
okay.
Uh, that's what I'm hoping to continue with. And I'm just enjoying where I'm at and
So
what's been.
this particular vein that you're talking about, I want to know about your relationship with your viewer. So are you painting for yourself and your interests in it, which is, you know, what a lot of artists do, or how much of your eye is geared towards the viewer of your works?
Well, I actually have addressed this idea in some of my artist statements when I enter shows and things. I like the idea that maybe the viewer will see a familiar landscape. And believe me, out here, some of these are known, some of these peaks and things, um, that they can suddenly see something with new eyes. So I think that there's definitely a dialogue with a viewer out there who is going to see see things differently now because of the way I've presented a familiar landscape. And in fact, I've seen that sometimes on some of my Instagram posts. Uh, you know, they're almost like I can call them locals who will like my work, right? I'm saying, oh, this is in Winter Park, this is in the Fraser River Valley or whatever. And, I remember one comment of a person who's, I think he's like he has like a car dealership or something out here. And he said, "This really makes me happy."
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that meant so much to me.
Mm-hmm.
That, I just that someone sees that there's ways to view this landscape that we see every day and we all love. And then to bring something fresh to it, to look at it with new eyes. So yes, I do think about what a viewer's response may be. And I get them too. I'll be at shows and um, people will want to talk about, what's going on, and that's a wonderful thing.
Speaking of the viewer's response and making as many people happy as possible through your work, have you ever explored the idea of doing any sort of printmaking?
I just did a little intaglio class.
Okay.
Um, just because I thought I should learn something new. I met an artist out here who's a terrific monoprint artist.
Yeah.
I mean, her pieces are very complex. They're fantastic.
Yeah.
And when I met her, I said, "Oh, can I come watch your process sometimes?" So she works out of a studio that's available through the Art Students League in Denver. And I met her there, and her process was so complex, but
Well,
she built in these beautiful things. And I thought, well, maybe I'll take a monoprint class.
yeah.
But then I was sort of daunted by her own work. So I thought, well, I'll take Intaglia. I'll take something that's really
Yeah.
about a drawing. So I just finished one, actually.
Good.
I'm not sure if I'll continue with it. One of the hangups I have is that, when you're an artist, you bring all these objects into the world. What's going to happen to all these objects? I have a friend back east who goes to estate sales, and she has the most incredible collection of portraits that
Hmm.
she just gathered.
Oh yeah.
They're in the 30s, the 20s. people you never knew. Some of them are academic, some of them are probably better than that, but it's a fantastic collection.
Mm.
And so I was thinking, well, where are these things going to end up? I try to give away, as many as I can. Some
Yeah,
sell,
yeah.
some I give away, and some I paint over. But it's
Well, I
all like you
I
want to leave the world without too many pieces. Well, why would I want to make a bunch of copies of something? So I don't know.
Well,
Printmaking,
I ask about printmaking, not really about the editioning value of it, but the variety of mark making that's different that printmaking
yes,
allows you to do. I could see you getting interested in that. You don't have to make the full edition. And
true.
uh, there are what 8 billion people on the planet too, so everybody needs a copy. But I would love to see that kind of stuff. Do you ever have you ever worked in sculpture?
No, I really have not. I
Okay.
I have done clay. In fact, when I was in art school, I almost became a potter. So I did love clay and I loved throwing and making basic forms.
Hmm.
Um, but painting was obviously more tactile even than
Yeah, there are a
clay.
lot of painters that are like little wigged out with printmaking because there's so many steps you have to take, and they're so used to
Yeah,
like paint, brush, canvas, right?
exactly.
but
So did
it's but it's
yeah.
second nature once you get used to it. So uh so you talked about your time for just two more questions. You talked about your little studio that you have. When you walk into your studio, do you have certain, for better or worse, rituals that you do in your studio when you're about to make a new work? Do you ever do anything in particular?
Well, I keep a journal. So obviously
Okay.
the first thing I always do is make an entry for the day. And
Interesting.
I might talk about, other things that are happening, something that just happened or something.
Yeah,
Um, but then I usually have left notes from the last session. So I know things that I was interested in doing.
that's
So
great. You're the first artist that tells me about making journal notes as a start for working in the studio. That's fantastic. Have you ever shown those journals?
no, I haven't
Yeah.
shown journals. And they do have little like diagrams sometimes and things.
Oh, I would
Uh,
love to see those in your next exhibit.
and it's different from a sketchbook. I have a
Yeah,
sketchbook as well where I
right.
will um, make drawings, but the journal is different. And I think of it as a work tool,
Mm-hmm.
too. And I have them going back
Man,
decades of journals.
I got to see those. I got to get my hands on that. I have time for just one final question. Simple question. I ask all the artists, what does making art do for you?
Oh, well, it, it's an intellectual endeavor. So it expands how you um, deal with your day-to-day life for me. I read a lot, and that's a wonderful thing to do. Um, my husband's a musician. There's always music in this house. He plays in blues bands. He plays all kinds of music, but he works on classical. Every morning he practices Bach. So to have this kind of intellectual life where you have endeavor in art, or you might be talking about books. I'm very interested in poetry. I read a lot of poetry. Uh, it just is a way of living your life in the arts. And that's he and I have this idyllic little life out here in Colorado. Not to say it's almost ski season, and we will be out on those slopes for hours
Right.
every weekday coming up very soon.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Phyllis, I can't thank you enough for coming by and talking to me today about your work. I can't wait to see what you do next, to see what other stuff. And I also want to thank everybody who tuned in to watch today's art show episode with Phyllis and I. We really appreciate your support. Of course, liking, sharing, and subscribing really helps us propel this program forward. So, again, thank you for tuning in today. And again, Phyllis, thanks for taking your time today to talk with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Take care, everyone.